Hi guys, doing something a little bit different to the usual review schedule today, and I kind of wanted to get onto something I've been thinking about for a little while now, which was how do you get people into progressive metal, and metal specifically, prog rock's definitely something that you can get people into, but I'm not quite so qualified at doing that as I am at prog metal. So, I got to thinking, and I decided, you know what, screw it, it's a good enough topic for a video, let's make it into a video, why not, let's go for it. But I really wanted to do something a little bit different to what I would normally expect from this kind of content. I've seen a lot of people do their own ways to get people into progressive metal, and they're all brilliant. I think they're all fantastic. But it's not my way. It's not how I would get somebody into progressive metal. I wanted to go down a slightly different path, and I got to thinking to myself, I don't want to do anything too obvious. I don't want to go, oh, here's Dream Theater's Pull Me Under. Listen to that 15 times, and if you still don't like it, you probably won't like prog metal. I know. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go, oh, here's Haken, oh, here's Lepros, here's Between the Buried and Me, here's Periphery, blah, 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 blah. No. I wanted to do a little bit more, slightly more off the beaten track. Not completely, obviously. There are still, bands which are very popular in the progressive metal scene, which I still think are very good at introducing people to the genre. But I wanted to give people a little bit more of a wider or broad spectrum of what's out there, the sort of things that are available within the genre. I also wanted to keep this to reasonably short songs, so I made sure every song here is 6 minutes or less, because if you're trying to get somebody into a genre, if you throw like a 17-minute multi-part suite at them, they're going to take one look at it and be, excuse me, no, I don't have time for this is ridiculous, go away. And they'll just go back to whatever it was they were listening to. No, what I really wanted to achieve with this list was I wanted to get a collection of songs that I felt would be good for introducing people who are already metal adjacent into the progressive metal world. So this isn't really a playlist for you, like, oh, I'm not really into metal at all, maybe this will convince me. I'm assuming you are already, somewhat into heavy metal at least, and you have an appreciation for, more distorted guitars, slightly more aggressive vocals, blah, 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 all that sort of thing. But again, I want to really emphasize the point that this is not a list of extreme progressive metal. This isn't a death metal introductory course. This is very much just a bog standard, straightforward progressive metal intro. So, with all my waffling out of the way, let's get straight into it, and I will be posting a link to the playlist down below, to which you'll be able to listen to after the video, and yeah, I'm going to tell you about the songs in the order that they're going to appear in the playlist. There is method to my madness with the order, which I will sort of elaborate as I go on through the video. So yeah, let's get straight into it with yeah, this is probably what I would consider to be the most, I suppose, standard prog metal song on the playlist, and the most perfect example of how to sort of really, smash the doors down, introduce the listener to what progressive metal is, all like in a really neat little package, I suppose. The thing I really wanted to achieve with this first song is, if I was only going to ask you to listen to one song from progressive metal, it would probably be this one. Will's song, Let the Colours Run by Caligulas Horse, has got a little bit of everything in it. It's got great instrumentation, with some really dynamic playing, fantastic vocals, lots of modern sensibilities, and it really does feel like the complete package in terms of how do you get started with progressive metal. Like I say, I could have chosen 101 different songs that really fit into this first slot under those sort of like criteria, but I feel this one does it better than pretty much anything else I could really think of. I considered like Strange Deja Vu by Dream Theater in this spot, but again, I wanted to avoid adding Dream Theater to this list because it's a little obvious. You could argue that Caligulas Horse these days is also a little bit obvious, but they're not as well known. They're still a little bit on the underground, so I think this will be a really good exposure, and it'll sort of expose you to that modern, typical progressive metal sound, which I think this song does a fabulous job of doing. Moving on from that, we have Go Full Bore by Toehider. Now, I wanted to add this one at this point into the playlist as well, because I really wanted to showcase to the listener what is capable within the spectrum of progressive metal, outside of the typical, which we've just heard, into the atypical, which we are now moving into. This is a wild ride, this song. It's very up and down. It's like this, it's like, but it's very extreme. It's very full on and doesn't really relent throughout its entire experience, but it's got this great sense of dynamics, I suppose, is what I'm really looking for here. Michael Mill's voice runs the gamut from these incredibly high-pitched wails and shrieks to these really raspy, nasty little sort of, gremlin noises or whatever it is. I mean, it might not actually be him doing it, I'm not sure. I don't remember. Either which way, it gives you a good example of the sort of breadth of vocal variety you can actually find in progressive metal, which I really enjoy. And honestly, I just think it's a lot of fun. The Caligulas Horse song is quite po-faced in some way. It's very serious. It's very sort of like, we are not mucking around. But Go Full Bore by Toehider, I think, demonstrates there's a sense of fun to the genre, that you can still enjoy yourself, you can still be a bit flirty with it, and I really like it for that. And I think it's a great song to introduce people with. Moving on from that, we're still keeping within the sort of campy territory, but we're moving into slightly more serious camp rather than, slapstick camp. The Signal Heard Throughout Space by Parius, which came out the other year, is a brilliant, brilliant song. It gives you that great narrative vibe that so often comes with progressive metal, but without feeling, esoteric or incomprehensible like so many of these sort of things often can. And I think this is a great song to introduce people to the idea of concept albums and concept records with, because it's straightforward, The narrative is not confusing, the lyrics are all there, and it absolutely rocks. It's such a good tune. The guitars are incredibly strong on this, the vocals are incredibly strong on this. Everything about this song is brilliant, and I honestly think that if you're really into sort of traditional metal, I think this is a really great way to go. This is a very strong song in that respect, but it also introduces a lot of the progressive elements that might have been, shying people away from the genre beforehand. Carrying on, we move on to The Stranger with Siren. Now again, I've been picking some of these slightly more obscure things with this entry, and I really, really wanted to shine a spotlight on The Stranger, and the album this is from, Kaleidoscope, I could have picked any song from this album, provided it was 6 minutes or less, of course, and I think it would have been a relevant fit on here, but I chose Siren because I really do feel that it exemplifies the one thing that a lot of people don't associate with prog that often, and that is a strong, melodic vocal performance. You think of progressive rock, you think of progressive metal, you think of incredibly technical, intricate instrumentals, which is fine, and that is a lot of what progressive metal is. But Siren by The Stranger puts the emphasis on the vocal melodies first, and I defy you not to just be overwhelmed by how strong the singing on this song is, and I really do think that it's a great example of what you can do with progressive metal with, being slightly outside of the lines, but not too much, This is still very much within the wheelhouse that we're wanting to explore here. But I think it's got that kind of almost pop-like sensibility in terms of its vocal delivery, which I think is really exciting for this song, and I think is a great way to introduce people into the genre further. Okay, one other thing as well that a lot of people do really associate with progressive, rock and metal in general is that it's very, very long, which is true. There's a lot of really long songs on progressive rock and metal. I would say I don't want to take this as a law, but I would estimate an average of maybe 7 to 8 minutes is not unusual at all. You've got a lot of 20-minute songs really sort of bumping up the average, obviously. But then you've got this little short, sharp, snappy one from Fair to Midland, Copper Tank Island, which also manages to sort of segue against another thing which people have against progressive metal, insofar as that it's not catchy. They think it's far too dense, it's far too layered, it's far too complicated. And I get that, and oftentimes can be. Copper Tank Island is this brilliant little 3-minute long number that you will find it impossible to sit still to. It's got such a driving groove, such a fun melody, you will find it you'll be toe tapping for its entire runtime. It's a great little song, and I think it's really worth listening to. Moving on, another thing that progressive metal is incredibly well known for is being instrumentally, technically brilliant, and what better choice to showcase this than an Endless Sporadic's Finding the Falls. Now, I could have chosen a lot of different instrumental tracks here. There's so many to choose from. The obvious choice would have been The Dance of Eternity by Dream Theater, but again, I'm trying to not scare people off, and that's a really tall order to just throw people into the deep end of that kind of craziness. What I like about Finding the Falls is how it manages to it layers, it's a building song. It starts off reasonably straightforward, quite simple, and it introduces all these little crazy elements over the course of it, up until the point where you've got the mariachi band sounding trumpets at the end playing the key melody of the song, and it's brilliant. I love it so much. But I do feel definitely that this is a strong contender for a accessible instrumental track. This isn't the sort of instrumental track where you need like a PhD in mathematics to fully understand the time signatures or anything like that. This is a straightforward but yet still complex and layered instrumental piece of music, and I think it's probably one of the best introductions to this kind of sound for somebody who's just sort of dipping their feet into progressive metal. But okay, now we're going to move into some slightly more dense, more aggressive, and slightly more angular music, because I think up until this point I've been treating you nicely, holding your hand a little bit, keeping on the clean and the more beautiful side of the progressive metal world. And I think Symphony X's Inferno Unleash the Fire is one of the better examples of straight up, very masculine sounding metal. It's sort of introduced with this kind of progressive framework. Russell Allen, he's possibly the most heterosexual sounding man alive, and he delivers an absolutely belting vocal performance here against some of the most incredible, fascinating, flashy guitar flourishes you'll see for quite some time. This is one of the older tracks that I've chosen on this playlist. I've kind of gone for a bit more of a contemporary feel because I think if you're introducing somebody to the genre, you kind of want to keep it current, I think. I think it's better, unless you're specifically going for like a particular era of music. I think keeping it current is a better way to introduce people to it because it shows that there's life in the old dog yet, as it were. But I think that Inferno Unleash the Fire has managed to retain a sort of timeless quality. It's like 20 years old now, which in music terms is quite a long time, but I really do think this is a fantastic piece. It's got the energy that you'd expect from something brand new. It's got that sort of eclectic feel to it, but it's also raw and powerful and angry and it's great fun. It's a really, really good song. You'll feel energized by it before it finishes, and it's one of my favourite Symphony X songs and certainly a great track to introduce people to the genre with. Okay, keeping things dark but not necessarily angry, we're going with Carnival's Set Fire to the Hive. Now this sort of comes under that umbrella of kind of like that Tool sound, that kind of, is it progressive metal, is it progressive rock? It's kind of a bit of both. It's mock or rettle, those both sound terrible. Whatever you want to call it, it's kind of a bit of both. But I think Set Fire to the Hive is a really good one to intro you to this kind of sort of Tool-like sound without going into the sort of like, oh my god, that's incredibly complicated style of Tool. This one is a banger. It's quite short, but it's very snappy. It's got a great chorus. It's got a great feel to it. It's a really enjoyably structured song. Definitely part of like a bigger whole, obviously, because Sound Awake, the album which it's from, is just... And if you like Set Fire to the Hive, I think you'll really dig that entire record. But I'm getting away from myself here. This is about single songs we're talking about here. You can check out the albums later if you really want to. Love this one. Great, great example of the genre, and really, it's just that darkened atmosphere that it's got. It just shows you that not everything has to be about space wizards and laser beams or dragons or anything like that. I think it's just like a really nuanced song that manages to tell a really direct message but do so in a complex and interesting manner, and I love this song for that. Okay, 2 to go. We're going with Vola and Gutter Moon. Now, a lot of recent progressive metal kind of falls under that kind of gent sort of thing. Your Tesseracts, your Peripheries, all that stuff. And it's fine, it's fine. I'm not the hugest fan of it, I'll be honest with you. It's not really my vibe. Kind of use the song as a bit of a scapegoat to kind of introduce you to that sort of music, but do so sort of like, laterally, as it were. Because the guitar sound is kind of genty, but for me, this kind of wins out because it's got a really strong keyboard feel to it as well, which I think is really crucial for a lot of progressive metal, and especially for this kind of music. Gutter Moon has got one of the strongest build-ups and payoffs I think I've ever heard in a progressive metal song. You'll know the bit when it gets to it because it's so explosive and so satisfying, and it does a brilliant job of fusing that kind of early to mid 2010s progressive metal where everybody was djenting, and it takes that style, takes that sensibility, and it does something different with it, which I really, really like. So the chances are that if you do enjoy this particular track by Vola, you may very well want to start exploring things by Periphery and Tesseract. But I think throwing you in the deep end of that kind of music is a little bit... It's not what I want to do. It's not what I want to do. I don't think it's a great way to introduce people to the music. You want to be a little bit gentle with people first, but let them enjoy that sort of style of music, which is what I think Gotomoon does a great job of. And finally, we've made it to the end, and I've decided to be a little bit cheeky with this one. I know I've been going on, I'm not going to choose anything like that scary, that intimidating, that whatever, but I think if you've made it through the playlist up until this point, I think you're maybe ready for something a bit stronger, a little bit more medicinal, shall we say. And I figure Devin Townsend's Poltergeist is a really good way to sort of test the waters to see if you're ready for that kind of extremity in progressive metal, which would obviously then segue nicely into my beginner's guide to extreme progressive metal. I really wanted to throw this one in at the end to sort of test and see how you're doing at this point, you know? You've had some strong kind of aggression from the playlist so far, like with Symphony X and what have you. You've had a little bit of cheekiness from Toe Hider. You've had some strong keyboard stuff from an Endless Sporadic. And I figure, let's chuck them all into a blender and see what happens. And Poltergeist by Devin Townsend is one of the most interesting ways I think I could possibly end this this playlist, this introduction to progressive metal, because I think it is a bit of a gateway. It's kind of a transitory track, if you will. It kind of figures like, here's all the stuff from progressive metal that we've been sort of building you up to. This is the end result of what happens if you put it all in a blender. And if you like that, you'll definitely be ready for something a little bit more tasty. So yeah, there we have it. Like I say, I will be leaving a link to the playlist down below where you'll be able to experience this all in its extremely well selected, very specific order. There is no accident to the way I've put these things together. I think everything sort of flows nicely between each other. I'm very proud of that, by the way. But yeah, I think that if you were to put this playlist in front of somebody who's been a bit on the fence about progressive metal, I think maybe by the end of it, they'd be ready to, you know, explore a bit further and see if see what else the genre's got to offer. Maybe check out all the albums that these songs are from, see which you like the most, and figure yourself out from there. So, yeah, there we go. There we have it. That's my introduction to progressive metal. I hope you enjoy the songs that I've talked about here today. And if you did like this video, please do give me a thumbs up. Please do drop me a subscription if you've been enjoying my content. And as always, guys, until next time, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.